So it's been a little bit since I have checked in with you guys via video. I'm sure you've all been missing it terribly, but I wanted to respond to two questions. And the first one I'll be responding to, I'll do it in two separate little videos. The first one I want to respond to is module number 6, discussion question number 2. And reading through what a lot of you are writing, it's always interesting to me when I think about something like schizophrenia, or some of the ways that we diagnose people with psychoses in our culture. And it's a really fascinating thing for me that even for as long as I've been around people who sort of embrace a postmodern mindset, or maybe even engage in narrative practice in their own ways, it seems like there's a lot of contextual understanding for a lot of different things: depression, anxiety. But oftentimes what I found with colleagues when it comes to things like schizophrenia or more major forms of psychosis as have been defined by medical associations, by the DSM, beliefs around the cause and the cures for those things seem to run really deep within our culture. And what I mean by that is sometimes even people embracing a postmodern perspective will still see something like schizophrenia from a really medical model perspective. And so for me, it's really encouraging to see some of you in this discussion post. It's really speaking to the context, really speaking to the culture, and kind of talking about how maybe you're stepping into some new ways of understanding experiences that people might define as schizophrenia, experiences that people might define as psychosis or delusions or hallucinations. And I'm just finding that all of what you're saying is really sort of impressive to me, in the sense that you guys are all really considering, after looking at the Hearing Voices Network and reading through some of the stuff there, watching some of the videos, that it really is a culture-bound way to understand, and not just to understand, but to respond and to treat things that might show up in people's lives that appear to be what we might call schizophrenia. I think in Charlene's post, you talked about how hearing voices or having schizophrenic experiences, that sometimes those aspects of someone's experience can be something similar to how people have different abilities to see color. Oftentimes we label that as color blindness, where people might see green as blue or red as blue, or all these different variations. People might read in different ways. People might construct words or see letters put together in different ways than what we might ultimately term as normal. And so I'm encouraged by the posts that I see, where if we as a culture sort of take this perspective of trying to understand and trying to offer a sort of collective support to people who have these experiences, that their experience of what we might call psychosis doesn't necessarily have to be a debilitating experience. And we've seen that through some of the resources that we've been exposed to in this course. That if we take a perspective that this is just a normal human variation of experience, that some people are going to have these experiences that give them an enlightened understanding, or somehow allow them to access a deeper or larger spiritual realm, or have a certain kind of wisdom in life that maybe not all of us share, but they speak to that in ways that isn't represented in our experience. That when we come together, when we see cultures that come around those people and support that and offer community, offer care in a way that doesn't stigmatize that experience, that it doesn't necessarily become something that's debilitating in their life, but it just becomes a different kind of human experience. And I also was thinking too about the different kinds of hallucinations or voices that show up in different kinds of cultures. And I know in the US culture, voices or what we might call hallucinations show up a lot of times in a paranoid sort of way. And I just wonder how culture-bound some of those experiences in and of themselves might be. And it also, I don't know if anyone is familiar with this term, but when we talk about disability awareness and activism around those different ways that people express ability in their lives, there's this term that I've come to use and to know, and again, being informed by people living with alternative abilities. But in thinking about the answers that people provided for this post, and in response to some of the stuff we read on the Hearing Voices Network website, it's almost like we could see what we call schizophrenia as a diverse ability. And so that's a term that sort of I kept thinking about as I was reading each of your posts and thinking about how we can understand, respond, and come alongside people in different ways around schizophrenia than maybe we have before. And if we could sort of stand with people and see them as having a different ability and not having just a disability, or having some sort of deficit or psychosis, how that might potentially change things. And there's a place I know about in Long Beach. It's called The Village in Long Beach, and it works with people who have had diagnosis of schizophrenia or other psychoses. And it doesn't require them to be medicated in order to receive treatment. If people are actively hearing voices or seeing things that maybe other people aren't able to see, that's sort of embraced and those voices are brought into the treatment planning. They're consulted. It's very much a collaborative sort of approach. And oftentimes these individuals are homeless, and some of them don't want to be in an apartment, actually. They would rather be on the streets. That's where they feel they have community. They also feel less confined and restricted. And so although sometimes the goal is to get them into housing and to get them maybe on a track where they can be more self-sufficient and be in an environment where they're contributing members of society, some will choose not to participate in a housing program, but still access services while still remaining on the streets. And I think it's just a really good example of how, even within a culture that really stigmatizes things like schizophrenia, that there are certain pockets around us of people who are trying to engage and embrace different ways of working with individuals who have those experiences. And so something worth checking out if you're ever interested. If you ever end up living somewhere near Long Beach, they do invite people in for trainings and tours and things like that to kind of understand and see their perspective, their philosophy in working with these individuals. But again, just encouraged to see all of the thoughts and ideas that you guys have on the topic, and appreciate your openness to thinking about some of these things in new and different ways. Even if you're already primed for that, given your narrative training in this program, these often tend to be more difficult things to kind of expand our thinking about. And so I see that happening and just appreciate your engagement with all of that. So keep it up. I'm going to post another short video in a second about the next discussion question number 7. So see you in a few minutes.